school students after their supervisor left for a while. They found themselves in some unknown place where phones were not caught, and in front of them was a winged girl who calls herself a goddess and says that they were called in order to save Fantasy. She also says that soon all the students will be moved to the Temple of Fantasy, where they will be met by the saint who received the prophecy and who will provide them with any help. One of the guys, Ohanu, decides to ask if there will be levels, skill windows, and so on. Will be. The girl, Chan Myeon, asks if there will be knights, the Middle Ages, and so on. Will be. Choi Kangmin wonders if one of them will become a real hero. No, because not everyone is endowed with equal power, and only after receiving the recognition and blessing of the gods, they will be able to become them. And the class president, Eubora, finally raises the most important question. How soon will they return home? The goddess does not have an exact answer to this. She simply says that if the future heroes defeat the demon lord, then the gods who gave them blessings will fulfill their wishes. The questions did not end, but the more there were, the less specifics the girl gave. And now the moment comes when the main character himself raises his hand, and then simply asks to be sent home. He is not a fighter and there is nothing for him to do here, to which the goddess asks the reporting question. The world is on the verge of collapse. So why do they turn a blind eye to misfortune and express a desire to continue their normal life? Kang Hansu replies that he can't be a hero because he makes his family worry. The girl studies it for a long time before announcing that everyone who also wants to go home should tell her right away. As a result, the high school student is still standing alone at the portal. He gets, like, on the ground, but very far from the school, near some forests. And behind, like Salvation, someone's rustling is heard. Kang turns and meets with huge werewolves who have already managed to feast on some elf, and were aimed at him. This is not Earth. All the other classmates end up in the City of Saints, the prologue. They are met by a saint, Alsus the Master of the Sword. And also soon a princess appears, who falls because of her heels right in front of high school students. Athena is an archmage with the appropriate profession. Okan immediately started checking the status window before a lot of messages from various gods began to pop up, such as, a certain god evaluates heroes by their faces and others. You can get favor from them, and those who don't will. They just won't be needed. So, in this new world, their adventure began. The main character continued to run away from monsters, along the way managing to click on the status window in which the curse hero shines. The languages of hostile races will be automatically translated, and the experience gained from hunting and achievements will be reduced. And even though he tries to talk to them afterwards, they are clearly not in the mood to maintain contact. But when the werewolves reach Hansu, he squints before he hears someone talking, who does not understand, and then an arrow digs into his leg. Elves, and while a skirmish has broken out between the two races, he has a way to crawl away somewhere far away. He falls into a tree, to pray to such a god as the goddess who threw him into a bunch of events. Kang was clearly not going to. Apparently, he will have to die here, and at that moment, a boy looks out from behind a tree, invisible to his eyes. A certain god is peeping. God is already openly spying on him, and the guy, being on the verge of death, tearfully asks to save him. Windows with inscriptions continue to appear. At first, they ask him why he is alone, and not having received a specific answer, they are confused. There are no other gods here. The word outsider comes off the tongue, but the boy in the hood does not understand it. Hansu is lying about being a lone wolf running around in a mountainous area, and well, the interlocutor likes this term. He himself is not the same, but lies in order to help him. And it really works. A certain god helps him, the arrow splits, and his body feels much better. Next to the blessing, an outsider F appears, whose subsequent characteristics, all statuses, except death, will be reset, and something terrible will also happen if the wolf leaves the wilderness. But since he has gotten better, now he can try to escape from his abusers again. However, in the end the wolves shoot a stone at him, because of which Kang stumbles, but still able to stand on his feet, continuing on his way. That's just the next obstacle turns out to be a cliff, jumping off from which the hero will definitely die. Either death from enemies or from jumping. And then he just turns to the monsters and offers them something new. Whoever catches him first, the guy will give his most delicious body parts. Naturally, absolutely all werewolves rush at him immediately, ready to tear him to shreds. And because of such pressure, the guy falls backwards, hugging huge bodies with his hands and turning over. The force of the collision with the ground was so strong that a column of smoke and dust flew everywhere, and soon, when all this dissipated, Kang was breathing heavily, lying on the corpses of monsters. A certain god admires his survival skills, even though the guy himself says that there is nothing special about it. He barely gets up before he hears one of the werewolves still muttering meat, trying to reach him and stab him with a dagger. Unexpectedly, his status window even opens, level 3 Blue Moon Butcher. Maybe because of him, the monster remained alive after such a height. Apparently, there will always be enemies stronger than heroes, as in typical MMORPGs. Kang grabs the stone in his hand, intending to end the life of a werewolf. Meanwhile, in the temple, the saint talks about the blessing in the level. If with the latter it is enough to accumulate experience from killing creatures with status windows, then it is difficult to get the first one. High school students almost do not listen to her, thinking that having received such power, they will become invincible. But many people get tense when a girl says that the gods will constantly watch them, even in a dream, even in the shower, but there is nothing vulgar about it. Chan Ming sees it in a more positive way, for which he even receives a blessing, the charm of F. But a certain goddess does not like that she begins to use her charm left and right, so the girl receives a curse, punishment F. The saint says that as soon as a person receives a curse or blessing, it will not disappear until death itself. Also, the higher his rank, the stronger the effect, and once he raises it, he will never be able to lower. Meanwhile, the hero takes the weapon from the werewolf, noticing that the level has not risen at all, and God does not give any specifics. He decides to move on before bumping into the pack again. Well, this is his chance. The guy doesn't change tactics much. He ties a vine to a stone, swinging it in the air. The werewolves had just noticed his presence by this time, while Kang was about to show the monsters what centrifugal force is. In fact, if he just avoids death, then the blessing will take care of everything else. He manages to deal with all the wolves, and then ask one about where the village is and what kind they are. The gnoll points him aside and then asks him to spare him. But after all, Kang promised that he would just hurt him less and not spare him, right? In the temple, they arrange a rest, telling that tomorrow high school students will begin their full-fledged training in fencing and magic. Okan is immediately asked if it is possible not to study at all, because, apparently, he is too self-confident, which is why some immature god pays attention to him. The next morning, everyone was already lined up, waiting for Princess Athena. At the same time, the guy gets the blessing special. You are the most special hero in the whole world, and only you can feel this blessing. Well, he has nothing to do here. The guy gets to the city square of the prologue. He goes immediately to the Guild of Mercenaries, where he decides to sign up immediately, as it is done in many games of this genre. And then a red-haired lady approaches him, who warns that it is very dangerous and he needs to return home. Okan himself thinks that this mercenary is some kind of princess in disguise. That's why he decides to catch her, inviting her to his team. The immature main god is dying of laughter. By this time, Hansu manages to deal with another pack and find out that the village is located in the west. His god says that he absolutely does not care about what is happening. But then another gnoll suddenly appears, which the guy is going to attack, but the people who arrive do it for him. They collide and do not understand each other at all, which is why Kang decides to immediately fall to his knees and raise his hands above his head. Just an ordinary human gesture of surrender. They are already heading somewhere together. Hansu managed to explain his name to them with gestures, but he can't understand anything else from someone else's speech. Such a barrier, to be honest, is very much in the way, despite the fact that it seems that new acquaintances are friendly to him now. But God is not happy with this situation at all, because the guy does not behave like an outsider. He also talks to him as if they are close. Kang just shrugs him off and talks about his own. He also managed to find out other people's names. The big guy with the beard is called Gary. He is most likely the leader of this group. Plus, he carries a damn huge sword behind his back. The young man's name is Cole. He laughs quite often, and he is also a two-handed man. He owns 2 swords. This is the girl who wanted to shoot him with a crossbow. She just distracts him by pointing somewhere in the distance when they go out into the open. Smoke. If not from a fire, then from someone's houses. God again notices that he is not behaving like an outsider. Literally a minute later, the gnolls appear from behind, who clearly intend to tear up the entire team. And Hansu is really going to attack first, but he was outpaced by Cole and Gary, who rushed to the attack. Bad or good, but everyone starts to protect him, and even he managed to save Misa from strong jaws during one of the attacks. And it seemed that here it was, an idle and a common victory, but for some reason the group is not particularly happy about it. Despite the protection provided to her, the girl still directs her crossbow directly into his chest and shoots, caught where the heart is. The world disappears before my eyes. We can understand what men and the girl are talking about. They considered the kid dangerous, especially when he took out a dagger, but now he can't even be sold into slavery, so they'll just have to sell everything he has. Missa reports that she did not hit the heart, so Cole needs to be more careful, but the latter decides that it is necessary to end this just right. The guy raises one of his swords, ready to deliver the last blow, but abruptly freezes when the Kana status window pops up in front of him. There are only two reasons for this phenomenon. Either the high school student shared it himself, or he has a special blessing, and it is logical that under such circumstances the target should be alive. Hansu rises with a sharp movement and cuts the swordsman's throat. In the same way, he ends up with Gary, and Misei, despite pleas for forgiveness, also dies, having managed to hit him with an arrow one more time. I have to take off her uniform and put it on myself while God laughs, but then says that he respects this hobby of his ward. It was just the only armor that suited him. But at the last second, he managed to see her status window. She also had a blessing, but the girl was not a hero. Apparently, this was a very common phenomenon. Kang decides to continue on to the village. The good thing is that the dead carried a bag of coins with them. Meanwhile, magic training is taking place in the temple. Athena claims that talent is really important in magic, which is determined by pedigree and acquired academic connections. And by becoming her students, they will keep in touch with her. She also says that it is still possible for a person who has neither one nor the other to become a magician. And since Yubora asked this question, the princess decides to make her first student and asks her to take an oath using magic. Due to the fact that they have made such a connection, Yubora gets a blessing of rank C. So, if you don't have parents or a teacher with the blessing of magic, then you won't be able to become a wizard. Then the lesson continues. An ordinary magician easily uses his skill. This is called white magic. There is also black magic that is used without a blessing. And if you want to achieve it, then you will have to use your body as fuel. Our hero gets to the village. Fortunately, he manages to reach the tavern by bribing the guard and at the same time the owner of the building where you can relax. When he is in the bathroom, he cannot wipe off one spot of blood, to which God replies that it is a mystery. Someone's voice is heard outside the door, which, as it turns out, Kang is able to understand. Judging by his curse, this is a representative of a hostile race. The guy gets dressed and grabs his dagger. The high school student still decides to open the door and hide the weapon, since judging by the conversation, the village head himself may appear before him. So it turns out, and he looks, by the way, like an ordinary person, even though he is young. And I came to see for myself what kind of a foreign traveler this is. Another man warns him to hide his status window. And in general, the headman assumed that some elf spy would be in front of him, because the village has a very strained relationship with them. The Gnolls, who lost their territories due to the greed of the first, began to attack people, and the survivors created this village to take revenge. A certain god for some reason looks very upset. The man asks his last question, why didn't the paralytic drug affect the boy? Hearing this, Hansu immediately grabs his dagger, pressing the blade to someone else's throat with a sharp movement, but his hand cramps. It is useless to resist, so soon the boy finds himself in a kind of cell, while the man is angry at the elves, who were tied up by their legs to the ceiling. He asks to look at his status window. His name is Karmazin, so not only does he have the blessing of Madnessy, but also the curse of Elfsea, which says that the headman has become their enemy and his lifespan has been shortened. Now it becomes more difficult to kill the enemy, especially since he is a black magician. And in order to prolong his life, he needs to sacrifice someone. Naturally, the guy will become one. Kang calls out to the headman, to which he responds with displeasure, rejoicing that the guy does not start begging while he is distracted by whipping the still living elves in bags to death. His actions are completely immoral, so the high school student himself decides to take him by trickery. He talks about how he understands what it's like to walk down a path that no one can recognize. Karmazin is delighted that now he himself, apparently, has become an outsider, which means that he should become the only wolf. Actually, that's right, the lunatic still wants to kill him. However, after that, for some reason, the headman becomes more supportive of him and chooses some elf, whom he throws off with chains on a circle for sacrifices. Apparently, the hero will stay alive. But when everything happens, the man needs the consent of the victim, which he receives from the fact that they promise the unfortunate elf that he will let his girlfriend go. After the ritual, Hansu realizes that for some reason the gray-haired man is not getting any younger, to which he receives an answer that the headman in front of him is not a person at all. He says that when he was of our race, because of the curse, he immediately became sick and old. And if then a wandering magician who proposed an experiment would not have looked into the village, then wouldn't make him a gnoll, not a werewolf. No, Karmazin just has the top of a hyena on his chest. A hybrid of those who have a grudge against the blonde-eared creatures. And it seems that this is condescension, because the man himself puts his palm on the guy's shoulder and says that today is the most wonderful day, and he was finally able to know who he is. And then he adds that he uses the life of a high school student properly. Apparently, you can't run far from death. How sad. We are shown the formation of Princess Athena. She was called the genius of the magic kingdom of archmages, and she herself has always admired hardworking people. Being a princess took up most of her time, but thanks to her talent, she didn't have to put much effort into it. And despite the fact that Eubora heard explanations about the academic connection and pedigree, she still wanted to learn the whole skill on her own. That's why the princess chose her as her first student. Later, the Archmage explains to the girl that if she wants to strengthen her magic, then she should imitate the magic of her teacher or parent. Thanks to the patronage, the royal family inherits some of the talents of their ancestors. It is because of this that they are able to use outstanding flame magic for many generations. But she can create something out of ice with her own. And after that, Chan Myung raises the question of how to use magic for those who do not have a blessing. A real hum rises, during which the princess asks who will become her second student. Naturally, everyone is torn, which is why a more or less friendly class becomes enemies who will fight for a place. After that, she continues the lesson, saying that you can acquire your own magic through training and practice. But it does not look like black magic at all. The latter requires sacrifices during each use. It is impossible to master it yourself. Already in the village, the guy sits in the call circle before the headman asks for his consent. We need to act quickly, otherwise life will really end here. He asks Karmazin about his last wish, to see Misa for the last time. Hansu lies that he is the boyfriend of a dead girl, but the man doesn't really believe him, because he knows that her boyfriend is Cole. Fortunately, the high school student again manages to get out by saying that he is her ex, and if the headman still does not believe him, then let him sniff. And really, he smells like a girl, so he's not lying. Does he have any other desire? Kang asks him to let him go free if he can survive the ritual, and it would seem that they made a deal, but the gray-haired man is so nasty that he takes it as consent, which means that you can start a sacrifice. During it, the whole body hurts, but by some miracle the guy managed to get out of the rope and hit the man in the face. The world is fading. The headman is shocked that the guy managed not only to deceive him, but also to survive the ritual. The outsider's blessing removed all the effects and even restored his shortened life. But now you have to fulfill your part of the deal, right? The boy grabs a dagger and examines the bound elves. He frees the blue-haired woman and throws her over his shoulder, immediately rushing to the door while Karmazin, still surprised, looks at their backs. After all, he needs to meet with Messiah, who is dead. But the headman is no longer so positive. He is just about to use his black magic, as he abruptly chokes on his own blood and begins to age. What kind of status does this guy have? Who is he anyway? Kang pulls out his dagger, shouting that he is an outsider's apostle, while a certain god tells him not to put on airs, and then he himself is embarrassed. And maybe by killing the headman of the 13th level, he will finally be able to raise his own. But it's better to think about escaping. And just as Hansu turns around, he hears the words about revenge. If Karmazin's human body died, then the gnoll's head certainly didn't. The man rushes at him, inflicting, as it seemed to him, a fatal blow along the chest and heart area. But everything is overgrown on the high school student, as if on a dog. And in the end, Kang manages to kill him because the girl he grabbed managed to block the headman's way with her shackles. Before his death, only the gnoll plaintively apologizes to his daughter for not being able to take revenge. He released all the prisoners, even called the guards, and it seemed that everything was over, until soon. The elves were still not positive towards him and fired at him while the guy was running away. New mentors magicians began to appear in the temple, who wanted to receive the title of Mentor of the Hero. They train again when Princess Athena talks about how to create a fireball, and when she is asked again if mathematical formulas are needed there, she refuses. But other archmages who pulled up refuted her answer, saying that it is important to know a lot of all sorts of factors that can somehow affect the outcome of events and magic itself. Meanwhile, we are shown a village where Espresso, the servant of the elf princess, is being treated. She and everyone else also escaped from Karmazin's grasp after being rescued. Her friend comes to her, who says that they have lost track of the boy. It turns out that they attacked him because of a dagger with a royal emblem, which makes the maid very angry. She even calls all people ordinary animals. Here the barely alive elder Celeblus comes into the room, in which royal blood flows, but because of eternal life she became the elder's toy, and stayed in the basement the longest. On the contrary, she is even grateful to the person for saving them. What Hansu used was a breach of contract. If it is terminated, then everyone should pay the same. Parmesan underestimated the life expectancy of the boy and self-destructed, and the blue-haired one is going to find him. It turns out that a certain god was spying on all this, who immediately returns to his outsider, asking if he is alive at all. Hansu is alive and well, but stuck in the foliage of a tree. We are shown how fencing lessons are held. The master leads them to the banquet hall, where there is a huge table with drinks and treats. He is not very happy with the fact that the guys think of this art only as some kind of ignorant fight, so he asks the captain of the knights to arrange a sparring that takes place between him and Alsus. The first one, by the way, manages to defeat and injure the blonde, because he was distracted by the students who whispered that it was not like fencing at all. That is why, after treatment, the sword master asks the captain to attack with all his might. Their weapons are filled with mana and they face off in a duel in which the man's sword simply breaks in half. Then Alsus sits back down and asks everyone to drink tea, which contains a medicine that will help us to get a blessing faster and safer. At the same time, Kang is still sitting in the tree before the gnolls come running to him and ask him to come down. Ironically, even they are easier to trust than humans or elves. However, he still beats them, realizing that the Trinity was given to him too easily. Hansu decides to open his status window and notices that his coefficient has increased. God mocks him, but then says that the more, the better. Finally, one of the gnolls looks up, and the guy offers to negotiate. He is ready to give him elven meat if the wolf answers the question. He is interested in the gnoll swordsmanship that the elder used, but it seems that the gnoll does not